Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading The Golden Goblet, and I'm going to finish chapter 3. In my book, I'm at the top of page 52. Ranofer is in the goldsmith shop, and he's trying to decide how he is now going to participate in the theft of gold. Pang, pong, pang. Once more, the sour notes of the hammer offended Ranofer's practiced ear. He paused behind Maria's bench, squirming inwardly as he watched the work being done all wrong. Finally, with some misgivings, he touched the apprentice's elbow. "Hey, what is it? Can't you see I'm busy?" Maria scowled over his shoulder. He was a youth of about 17 with the blunt hands of a farmer. Gold working did not come easy for him. And it was obvious his poor results with the bowl had ruined his usual even disposition. "I crave pardon, friend," Ranofer said. "I know why your bowl is not shaping properly. Will you allow me to tell you?" Mollified by the courteous tone, Maria shrugged his big shoulders. "Well, what then if you think you know? It's certain I don't." "You are not striking the metal true. Hold your elbow higher and bring the hammer down smartly. Then it will shape as you wish." Maria frowned suspiciously from Ranofer to the hammer. "Perhaps it will, perhaps not. If I strike it sharply, will it not mar the surface even more? See the hammer marks there already? You should have a different hammer, one with a round face. But this one will not mark if you keep your wrist very stiff and firm to control your aim." Would you like me to show you?" "I won't then. You might ruin it." I might," Ranofer agreed humbly. "I have little skill and less experience, but I've watched my father raise 100 such bowls, and I know what should be done." "Oh, perhaps you do, perhaps you don't," the other grumbled, but he looked thoughtful. Once more, he placed his half-formed bowl upon the shaping stake, and raising his elbow high, gave a sharp, firm tap. The stake rang like music. Maria's face brightened. He turned the bowl upon the stake and struck again, then again and again. Each time the ring was true, and already the curve of the metal was beginning to assume the proper angle. "By Ammon, you're right," he exclaimed. "Aye, quite right," put in an amused, quiet voice. Both turned to find the goldsmith leaning on the next bench. He straightened, limped over to Maria, and taking the hammer from his hand, dropped it into the slot in the tool rack. "Try the cow's head mallet, my son," he advised. "It will not try tricks on you. As for you, Ranofer," he turned interested eyes on the young boy. "Come with me, I have a task for you." Flushing with pleasure and confusion, Ranofer followed him to one of the smaller furnaces. Upon the low table beside it lay a stone hammering block and a coil of gold wire. Rekh motioned for him to kneel on the mat, and extracting a mallet from the tool rack attached to the table, handed it to him. "Now, small one, you know something, it seems, of the gold worker's art. Do you know the manner of making little leaves we use to ornament ladies' jewelry?" "Aye, master." "Good. Make one now while I watch." Ranofer dared not believe his ears. "I make one, Neb Rekh, out of real gold?" Rekh only nodded toward the coil of wire and waited. Trembling with excitement, Ranofer could scarcely make his fingers loosen a strand of wire and straighten it. He, Ranofer, was to be allowed to work in gold, to learn a bit, to practice, to fashion a leaf. Aye, might the gods smile on Rekh the goldsmith, might they make him rich and honored, might Pharaoh himself shower gold upon him. Ranofer's mind, fluttering as uselessly as his fingers, focused suddenly upon the fire. Was it hot enough? He stirred it, then glanced anxiously at Rekh. "May I use the blowpipe, master?" "Use whatever you need." Once clasping the familiar shape of the blowpipe, Ranofer's hands steadied, and so did his nerves. He could do this. He'd done it many times with Thutra watching from his cot. There was nothing new. Just snip a length of wire, grasp it firmly in the tongs, and careful now. With infinite caution, Ranofer held the tip of the wire in the flame, blowing a light, steady stream of air through the pipe. The flame blued to intense heat. Presently, the wire tip melted and ran up into a bead. At once, Ranofer removed it to the stone block, dropped the blowpipe, seized the mallet instead. One sharp tap, and the bead flattened to a tiny leaf shape with the remainder of the wire as its stem. He studied it anxiously, running his tongue over his lips. Was it good enough? Was perhaps the stem too long, the edges too thick? He raised his eyes slowly to the goldsmith's face. Rekh was smiling. He was nodding approval at the leaf. It is a good leaf, Ranofer, but then it was the first, and I was here behind you, watching every move. One is always diligent with the first. I wonder what you would use such care in making a 15th or a 50th. To be sure, master, Ranofer said in surprise. How could I do otherwise? Without care, the leaf is ruined and must be done over. Aye, so it must. Rekh picked up the leaf, examined it once more, and then put it aside on the bench. Very well. This day the Lady Irnamat has ordered a necklace of many strands, ornamented with green stones and golden leaves. Fashion me those leaves, 50 of them, each one the twin of the last. When you have made them, bring them to me in the shop. He turned and limped away, leaving Ranofer staring after him in a ferment of joy. 50 leaves. He was to make the ornaments for a grand lady's necklace. Perhaps she would wear it to a dinner party at the villa of some great lord or count. Perhaps to the palace itself. Aye, to the palace. And Queen Ki, beloved of the two lands, would notice it and ask where it came from. Who had fashioned these delicate leaves, each one in a work of art? And the Pharaoh himself would lean from his throne to see the necklace better and... To work, stupid one, Ranofer chided himself. Dreaming will fashion no works of art. Cease gawking at the gold and use it. The day passed in a blissful haze, which not even the gnawing of Ranofer's empty stomach could penetrate. Even after the leaves were finished, the 50th, the twin of the first, and all made with supreme and loving care, his spirits continued to soar. Perhaps Rekh would now let him make leaves every day. Perhaps allow him to anneal wire, spread solder just so in the boxes, and learn and become skillful. Even back at his old chores of washing the sweep and pouring molds, Ranofer's rapt face and hurrying small body radiated such joyful hope that a contagion of laughter and joking swept over the whole courtyard. Even the first craftsman ceased to scowl, though he could not have told why. At last the day was done, a good day, a fine, fortunate day, favored by all the gods. It lacked but one thing to take the place of, one thing to place the seal of total success upon it, and that would take place very soon. Ranofer timed his leaving to coincide with Hecat's. With his friend beside him, he stepped confidently out the courtyard gate into the long shadows striping the streets of the goldsmiths. At once he spotted the Babylonian waiting for him in a doorway ahead. He walked on, a little nervous now, but trying not to show it. Surely with Hecat beside him, Ibni would not even dare approach him. Ibni was not so easily put off. As the two boys drew even with his doorway, he stepped out, grinning and bobbing his head, holding out the wineskin. A little gift for your honored brother, young Ranofer. I pray you carry it home to him. True, it is a poor gift and unworthy of him, but the wine is made by my wife from our own dates. And though humble, Ranofer drew a long breath and faced him. Gebu does not want it, he said. He bids me tell you he does not like your wine. Without waiting to see the effect of his words, he hurried on. Hecate followed, glancing back over his shoulder. "A queer fellow, that porter," he remarked. "I think you offended him, friend Ranofer. He has an ugly glint in his eye." "Let him. I'll not fetch and carry for such a one. I think he's half crocodile with his grin and his stinking breath." Ranofer swelled with satisfaction. He had bested his enemy with exactly the scornful phrases he had imagined this morning, and the seal of success was on the day. He dismissed Ibni from his mind, sniffing the air luxuriously. The shop's hot odor of molten gold had given way to the fragrance of lotus and marshweed, mingled with the familiar reek of the Nile and the pungent smell of natron and spices from the street of the embalmers, which they were passing at that moment. To Ranofer, light-headed with hunger and triumph, all the world seemed tinged with remarkable beauty. The western cliffs burned amber in the last of the sunshine. To the north, a falcon wheeled slowly over the shining walls of Pharaoh's palace, as if to proclaim the presence within the royal god-king he symbolized. Yonder from the fields, like flute notes, sounded the creaking of the water wheels. "The gods smile on Egypt," murmured Ranofer. "And on you too, is it not so? I saw you making leaves there like some elder craftsman. And by the hidden one, the master himself could have done no better." Ranofer drank in the praise and the respectful glance which accompanied it. "My father taught me how to make them." In a burst of confiding, he added, "Perhaps Rekh will teach me more now. Perhaps someday I shall be a master goldsmith and make necklaces for the queen." "May Amen grant it," Hecate replied warmly. "Then perhaps you will smile more often." They walked on in sudden silence, each a little abashed by his own sincerity. As the familiar palm-thatched outlines of the apprentices' quarters loomed ahead, Hecate resumed his usual flippant tone. "Behold, the great palace of the downtrodden approaches. Is it not a monument fit for the gods themselves? Aye, what a life we lead here! Dancing, parties, frivolity. Well, friend, I fear I must leave you now, as the hare remarked to the hunter. Farewell, and may Nult guard your sheep. Sleep." Ranofer grinned and waved, reflecting that anyone would smile more often when Hecate was around. He went on alone, trying to ignore the aroma of frying fish that drifted from the apprentices' quarters, and it seemed from every other house he passed. In spite of himself, there rose in his mind the image of a golden brown bolty fish, crisp without and succulent within, served on a platter and giving off fragrances sweeter than the lotus. "Do not think of it," he ordered himself. To forget it, he began to run, almost colliding with a group of glassmakers as he turned into the main thoroughfare that paralleled the Nile. He dodged in and out among the homebound workers, shouting greetings to Kai, the baker's boy, and a few other urchins he knew. He was turning his whole attention to physical activity so that he might not notice the nagging uneasiness beginning to force its way the conscious part of his mind. It grew stronger the nearer he drew to the street of the crooked dog. But the stronger it grew, the faster he ran, refusing to let it in, shoring up the bulwark of his mind against it. Only when he drew up breathless at his own doorway, flung it open and stepped inside, did his defenses crumble like faulty dikes. Faced with the dingy, familiar courtyard, all the eager hopes of the day vanished beneath the torrent of blackest fear. He had come home empty-handed. He had defied Gebu. In vain he tried to summon the proud resolve, the brave words he had planned last night. Behind him, the gates swung shut with a click like the jaw of the crocodile closing. And yonder, across the court, Gebu rose slowly from the bottom stair. Half an hour later, Ranofer sat hunched on the rough pavement of the courtyard, trying to stop the bleeding of his nose. Gebu still stood over him. His face was rock hard, save for the convulsively winking eye. His fists were like stone. He spoke in a voice that was hoarse with fury. "Has understanding now reached your head, slow-witted one?" Ranofer managed to nod. He could not speak. His body was raw with pain. His mind was like a disordered room still ringing with panic. "I am ready to instruct you further, if need be. You will bring the wineskin tomorrow to atone for your empty hands tonight. You'll bring it the next time also, and the next, and the next. Do you hear? Do you understand?" Again, Ranofer nodded, and the fresh welts on his back throbbed like a fist opening and closing. Gebu continued to glare at him in a moment. Then he thoughtfully fished a particle of food between his teeth. "By Ammon, I'll wager you'd hop fast enough if you were under my eye all day. You've grown lazy and insolent, playing about with gold, doing as you please. How would you like it, spawn of crocodiles, if you were never to walk through Rekh's door again?" Ranofer raised startled eyes, and Gebu's lips twisted. "Aye, you had best dance to my tune. You are a goldsmith's helper. Is it not what you want? Fail me once more, only once, and you'll find yourself a stonecutter's apprentice instead. I must have some use of you." He moved on up the stair, leaving Ranofer aghast. Stonecutter's apprentice. Apprentice to Gebu, within reach of his fists all day, pounding chisels against stone with great heavy mallets, instead of fashioning leaves or watching the gold turn crimson in the crucible. 7 years of bondage, all the while learning a craft he hated, with never a chance for the one he loved. Dismay changed quickly to despair. "It's no use," he thought. "No use, no use." Dazed with pain and hunger, he crept to his mat and buried his head in his arms. He doesn't seem to have an answer, and just when he was starting to have some success with Rekh, what do you think's going to happen? We got a long way to finish this book, so he must be going to try something else next. What do you think he's going to try this time? Well, we'll see when I start reading the next chapter. Bye-bye.